Hey, Pam.
Hey, Renee.
Hey, Pam, have you ever fallen down a rabbit hole online?
Probably less now than when I first went online, but still more times than I'd like to admit. It can be a real time waster, but sometimes it can also be fun and interesting. What about
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, I've been there. I remember the first time I found myself on the internet in the middle of the night. I'd been clicking and clicking for hours. And for me, it was like accidentally discovering a group of people that you never knew about before. And then suddenly you're there lurking, watching the party happen. It was unpredictable, exciting, addictive. Now, today, online radicalization can occur in many different ways. And in this program, we're concerned about extremists who believe that violent conflict is needed to change society. This kind of extremism frequently leads to anti democratic beliefs, such as the desire for dictatorship, civil war, or an end to the rule of law. Hey, everyone, I'm Renee Hobbs of the Media Education Lab and the Courageous RI Project.
And I'm Pam Stager, Director of Public Engagement for Courageous RI. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us on this courageous conversation journey. One of the not surprising things about the idea of falling down the rabbit hole is the fact that most of us have experienced the phenomenon to some extent. You know what I'm talking about. When one click leads to another, and suddenly, starting off with herbs, I'm now reading articles about survivalism and getting pop up ads about the best solar generator to buy for the coming apocalypse. Are we traveling down a rabbit hole today, Renee?
Well, we are certainly going to be exploring some of the pitfalls involved in that Alice in Wonderland experience, especially the extremist radicalization that can happen online. So, our question for today is, what can you do to support people who may be moving toward radicalization?
That's a good question for prevention. Researchers who study radicalization to violence note that it is a complex process involving both personal and external influences. Often, people who are feeling confused and uncertain about the future can take comfort in the simple, false solutions to complex problems offered by extremists. People who feel betrayed or discriminated against can harbor grievances, and some people have experienced trauma that leads them to want to scapegoat or retaliate against another group. Adolescents can feel a sense of status and belonging by participating in delinquent activities. It's a way that can make a young person feel powerful. So, whether the grievances are the fear of replacement that's felt by some white supremacists, or the concerns about racism, sexism, homophobia, the environment, or animal rights that drive some leftist extreme action, you can see how the drives might be similar.
Yeah. You mentioned that radicalization involves both personal and external factors. Pam, did you know that extremist recruiting happens in the world of online gaming and that the global video game industry is considerably bigger and more profitable than both the movie and the music industries combined?
I guess I'm not surprised. I know online video games are very popular. My grandsons all play them, like most other young men of their generation.
For many people, online games are harmless fun. And during the pandemic, extremists took advantage of the fact that young men were home alone, looking for excitement and yearning for peer connection and a sense of belonging. We know that the young men who committed those horrific acts of mass violence in Buffalo, New York, and Highland Park, Illinois, were active on gaming sites. These killers even live streamed their acts of violence. Remember, Pam?
Yeah.
We saw clips of this stuff on the nightly news, and their video footage even looked like a video game. Of course, these gruesome crimes were copied by other killers who were also part of these online networks. Extremists are now using gaming sites to create a radicalization funnel to recruit young people into extremist social networks. For some, the radicalization funnel can work like it did in Germany, where authorities discovered that children under the age of 14 were being radicalized in online video games. On the platforms, the boys didn't play games, they discussed extreme right politics. And to rise in status in this group, boys had to express an oath of allegiance to Hitler. Boys were instructed to perform offline behaviors like proving their loyalty, like shouting Heil Hitler at school or at home. Now, to be clear, it's not the social media platform or the video game that turned this boy toward violent radicalization. It was the extremist recruiter and his gang. Digital platforms and online games are like a shopping mall that enables recruiters to find new recruits. And there's a lot of extremist recruiting going on. A recent survey of gamers in 5 countries found that 17% of people under the age of 18 came across statements of support for ideas like a particular race or ethnicity should be expelled or eliminated. Or 15% encountered messages like using violence is justified or necessary to achieve a political gain.
Yeah. And in that same study, researchers found that many gamers had themselves experienced severe hate-based harassment, defined as the infliction of verbal or other abuse based on another player's actual or perceived identity. Here are some of the forms it takes online. Hate raiding or hate mobbing happens when someone is attacked in a coordinated fashion to overwhelm them with insults and threats. 24% of gamers under the age of 18 have experienced that. Sexual harassment happens when people make unwelcome and inappropriate sexual remarks or advances, and 15% of gamers under 18 have experienced that. Threats of violence occur when there are credible threats of physical violence made toward an individual or their loved ones. 15% of gamers under 18 have experienced this.
Oh, awful.
Stalking occurs when someone's personal information is monitored for the purposes of intimidation. Doxing happens when someone's address or other personal information is disclosed as a form of intimidation. And we talked about swatting in a previous session. That's when people make prank calls to law enforcement to dispatch armed officers to an address. Imagine how scary that could be.
Oof.
Some of you may have experienced these painful forms of hate-based harassment. Too many people are hurt by these forms of violence, most of which are considered crimes.
Wow. You know, many factors lead to radicalization. One thing we learned from the Department of Homeland Security is that punitive interventions by law enforcement in de-radicalization efforts do not help. In fact, they can actually lead to increased extremism. That's why the whole of society prevention approach is important. And that's what Courageous RI is, a whole of society prevention approach. We can address the problem of radicalization at the community level and across all sectors. To help people who've fallen down the rabbit hole of radicalization, we focus on 4 practices: active listening, media literacy, kindness and compassion, and community engagement and support. First, we start with active listening. It's listening with an open heart. It's the kind of listening that's not motivated by the need to persuade someone, but to understand them. Many of you have practiced this important listening skill as members of Courageous Conversations. Media literacy. It's a key competency that helps prevent extremism. That's because media literacy emphasizes asking critical questions about media and the importance of getting exposure to a variety of different points of view. Many of you have practiced your media literacy skills in analyzing media and in recognizing your own filter bubbles and blind spots. Third, it's important to exploit the power of random acts of kindness. Kindness and compassion have a kind of pay it forward mentality where we choose to be generous to people we don't know. Research has demonstrated that when extremists encounter people outside their group who exhibit kindness and generosity to them, it destabilizes their hate. It's hard to hate someone who has been gracious, kind, or generous to you. Now, finally, and maybe most importantly, we believe that community based education and empowerment opportunities need to be available to everyone, including people who are stigmatized, marginalized, and socially isolated. Everyone needs opportunities to engage in a community. And that's what Courageous RI is. And that's why we want people to spread courageous conversations everywhere.
Yeah, and all the information they learn here. Those are 4 practical ways that can help someone who may be falling down the rabbit hole of radicalization. So let's use a video to reflect on radicalization and de-radicalization. We'll analyze this video using media literacy's critical questions. In this video, we meet Johnny Holmes, who was the head of security at a high school in Blue Island, Illinois, located just outside of Chicago. That's where he met Christian Piccolini, a teenage student who was the leader of a local neo-Nazi group. Christian renounced the movement's racist principles after 8 years of involvement. Today, he devotes himself to helping others leave hate groups. Just one note of warning first. In this video clip, a racial slur is used. Okay, let's watch it now. Roll it, Renee.
I put you through hell.
You were rough.
I mean, there were fights. There were words that we had those years that I was
The
there.
one that I remember, I kind of ushered you into the dean's office.
I remember.
And I remember she put her arms around you to try to calm you down. And excuse the language, but you were like, "You black bitch, get your filthy hands off of me." And I lived to see the day when a nigger would be hanging from every light pole in Blue Island. Now, in my younger days, we would have been fighting until tomorrow. But my philosophy was be the parent away from home. You were a 16-year-old kid. I knew you had been brainwashed. And I remember saying to you, "Chris, how can you be filled with so much hate? You play on the same football team as my son."
Right.
And so I wanted the opportunity to get through to you.
It did get through to me. I want you to know that. And it was that compassion when I didn't deserve it that eventually stuck. You know, I got out of what I was involved in, but I still didn't have the courage to tell people about my past. Many years later, I was working for IBM, and I was terrified because of all the millions of places that IBM could have put me for my first day of work. It was at my old high school. And of course, within the first 5 minutes, as I'm standing in that hallway, here comes you walking right in front of me. And I didn't know what to do. You didn't see me, but I decided I was going to follow you to the parking lot and tapped you on the shoulder, and you took a step back.
Because I knew you as you were.
I didn't have words for you because I know all the hell that I had put you through. And all I could say to you was, "I'm sorry." But one thing that you told me that day, you were like a prophet. You said, "This isn't just about some white kid who goes into a Nazi group.
Yeah.
This is about every young person who feels vulnerable and, is looking where to belong." And because you did that, I'm doing what I do now.
And you've been doing a wonderful job. Because look at what's happening now. Reaching people, getting people on the straight and the narrow.
Trying.
That was one incident with us. Look how it's multiplying.
Yeah. I want to say thank you because I'm sitting here now because of you.
So we're going to discuss that
Yeah,
shortly.
let's discuss that video, shall we? It packed in a lot. How did this video make you feel, Pam? What adjectives come to mind?
I guess the first feeling adjective that comes to mind is hopeful. Hopeful that both a longtime neo-Nazi like Christian can make such a dramatic change, and that a school employee like Johnny Holmes can be so understanding and compassionate in the face of hostility. What about you, Renee? Do you have an adjective or a noteworthy moment from the video?
The adjective that I'm feeling after viewing this video is surprised. I guess I have stereotypes about neo-Nazis, and I have stereotypes about school security guards. And this video disrupted both of those beliefs.
Mm.
So why don't we analyze this video using the media literacy smartphone? We can see the author is StoryCorps. What's the purpose of this video, Pam?
It seems to be to tell a story that informs, educates, and maybe even to persuade. What techniques were used to attract and hold your attention, Renee?
Well, it's a pretty simple video production. It's actually an audio interaction with a still photo, but the still photo of the two men together alongside the words that are scrolling as we're listening to them, it definitely kept my attention. I liked how the different voices were captured in yellow and white. And of course, I really appreciated how this theme of being courageous was a part of this story. Courage and compassion were definitely the values that came through. And those were really compelling to me. Now, how about that question? How might different people interpret this message differently, Pam?
Well, I'm sure there are many people who would have acted differently in those circumstances, and I'm guessing they might have different reactions to it as well. Inspired, maybe, angry, betrayed. As for what's omitted, we don't really know how Chris is reaching people now, or how those in his neo-Nazi group felt or reacted to him leaving the movement from this video. But I was so curious about it that I found a 43-minute NPR story that fills in some of those blanks.
And Pam, that's a great reason why we love that fifth media literacy question. What is omitted? Because it activates intellectual curiosity. When you know that all media messages are selective and complete and incomplete, you also know that there's places you can go to learn more. Okay, now it's your turn to consider these issues more deeply. Here are the discussion questions we'd like you to explore. Have you or anyone you know experienced hate-based harassment? Do you know anyone who might be at risk for going down the rabbit hole of extremism? What do you think might draw them to extremist groups? And what can anyone do to help people think and see more clearly?
Have a great discussion, and thanks again for joining us on this courageous journey. We hope you'll share what you've learned with others to keep the ripples flowing.
Okay, bye now. And remember, stay curious, not furious. Thanks for being courageous with us. Bye now.